Introduction to Algebra, Part 11, Converting Distances. At the end of this lesson, you will know how algebra can be used to convert from one unit to another, and know how to convert miles, feet, and yards. In algebra, you'll hear people talk about units. Units are words we use to measure things in the real world. For example, things like miles or feet, or maybe yards. We can also measure volume like cups or tablespoons. We can even measure time in hours and days. Now, in this unit, we're going to talk about distance, and in some future modules, we're going to talk about volume and time. But for this unit, we're going to talk about the distance and the concepts of miles and feet and yards. Some examples of what might need to be converted is we might need to know how many feet there are in a mile, or maybe how many yards there are in feet, or how many yards there are in miles. So when you're doing conversions, you need to have a table, and in this case, we're going to have a table of feet to miles and miles to yards. So we have 5,280 feet in a mile, and we have 3 feet in a yard. So now let's take an example of how we can use this table. So how many feet are there in 5.2 miles? Well, let's talk about some algebra. We're going to set m as a variable, and it's going to be 5.2, and we're going to say f equals feet. Well, we know there are 5,280 feet in a mile, so f equals 5,280 times m, or feet is 27,456. That's 5,280 times 5.2. So here we very quickly converted miles to feet. So now let's ask ourselves the next question, which is how many yards in 5.2 miles? Well, we know that 5.2 miles is 27,456 feet. We're going to set y to yards, and we know that there are 3 feet in a yard, so we're going to say y equals f divided by 3. And so we take 27,456 divided by 3, and so we know there are 9,152 yards in 5.2 miles. So let's take another example. We converted 5.2 miles to yards kind of in a roundabout way, but what if we wanted to go from yards to miles, or miles to yards? Well, we know that feet equals 5,280 times m, and y equals f divided by 3. Which means if we take the 3 underneath the f and multiply, we know that 3y equals f. So we know that 3 yards equals 5,280 times m, or our yards is 5,280 divided by 3 times m. So let's take a real-world example as your questions. Denver is known as a mile-high city. Well, m equals 1 mile high. In elevation, how many feet is that? And okay, if it's that many feet, how many yards high is Denver? So that's our first question. Now our second question is, it's 57.6 miles between Germantown, Maryland and INWOOD, West Virginia. How many feet is 57.6 miles? And how many yards is that? Now let's go with a bonus question, see if you can figure this out. If when I step, my foot step length is 2 feet, how many steps is it from INWOOD, West Virginia to Germantown, Maryland? Okay, so go ahead and hit pause, try and answer these questions, and then we'll come back and we'll give you the answers. Okay, so now let's take a look at the first part. Denver is the mile-high city, 1 mile, so m equals 1. We know from previous examples that there are 5,280 feet in a mile, so f equals 5,280 times m, so f is 5,280. Denver's elevation is 5,280 feet, and you probably know that because I talk about that all the time, but we never talk about it in terms of yards. So, we know that yards equals the number of feet divided by 3, so we take 5,280 divided by 3, and we get 760 yards. So when we talk about the elevation of Denver, it's 5,280 feet, 1,760 yards, or 1 mile. Okay, first one was pretty easy for the most part, but now let's take something more difficult. INWOOD to Germantown. Well, we said that it's 57.6 miles to INWOOD from Germantown. So m is 57.6. Now we know there are 5,280 feet in a mile, so we take 5,280 times m, 57.6, and we get 304,128 feet. Now, how many yards is that? Well, again, we know that yards is feet divided by 3. So we take 304,128 divided by 3, and we get 101,376 yards. So it's 101,376 yards from Inwood to Germantown. So think if you had that 3-foot measuring tape, 1 yard, you'd have to measure it 101,376 times to go from Inwood to Germantown. Okay, so now let's see if you can figure out this bonus answer. Let's now say that S equals steps, the number of steps between Inwood and Germantown. Well, we know that for every step I take, it's 2 feet. So steps equals feet divided by 2. And we know from the previous one that it's 304,128 feet from Inwood to Germantown. So we take 304,128 divided by 2, and we get 152,064. So it's 152,064 steps from Inwood, West Virginia to Germantown, Maryland. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about volume.